Your soulmate screamed their love for you in front of everyone. You won't believe what happened. Open this right now. My beloved child, stop for one impossible moment, because what you are about to hear feels like it escaped from a future that has been waiting for you. Imagine a single heartbeat becoming louder than an entire crowd. Imagine someone who spent so long hiding their emotions suddenly reaching the point where silence was no longer an option. That moment, that impossible moment, is the reason you found this message today. Stay with me, because every sentence is another piece of a puzzle that has been quietly assembling around your path. What if the story you believed was ending was actually preparing for its loudest beginning? And what happened next was so unexpected that even the people standing nearby couldn't explain why the atmosphere changed in an instant. For longer than anyone realized, there was a voice carrying your name inside someone's heart. It was never weak. It was never uncertain. It simply waited for the perfect second when fear would lose its grip. Have you ever noticed how the strongest truths often arrive after the longest silence? That is exactly where this journey begins. Not with confusion, but with a hidden certainty that kept growing beneath ordinary days. Every memory they tried to ignore somehow circled back to you. Every conversation reminded them of something unfinished. Every attempt to move forward somehow pointed them back to the same direction. Coincidence? Or was life quietly arranging a scene no one could predict? Now picture this without rushing ahead. A place filled with voices. Faces looking in every direction. Conversations flowing like waves. Nothing appeared unusual, until one unexpected moment interrupted everything. Time almost seemed to hesitate. The ordinary became unforgettable. And in that instant, something inside your soulmate refused to remain hidden any longer. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't even logical. It was simply too powerful to stay locked away. Their heart finally became louder than their fear. But don't race to the ending just yet. Because the real surprise wasn't the confession itself. The real surprise was what happened inside the people who witnessed it. Some smiled without understanding why. Others became completely silent, sensing they had just watched a turning point that could never be erased. Even those who barely knew the situation felt that something meaningful had shifted. Strange, isn't it? Sometimes a single honest moment creates a ripple far beyond the people directly involved. Ask yourself something. Why would this message appear before you today? Why this title? Why this exact moment instead of yesterday, or tomorrow? What if your timing is not random? What if certain stories arrive only when your perspective is ready to receive them? There are moments in life that announce themselves quietly before they unfold loudly. This may be one of those moments. So remain here a little longer, because the deeper meaning hasn't revealed itself yet. The remarkable part is that your soulmate didn't suddenly discover these feelings overnight. No. Their emotions had been gathering strength through countless invisible moments. Every missed opportunity became another lesson. Every unanswered question became another reason to search for clarity. Every distance only made one truth brighter. They finally understood that pretending not to care required more energy than simply being honest. And when a heart reaches that realization, everything begins to change. There is something fascinating about destiny. It rarely moves in straight lines. It twists. It pauses. It hides important chapters behind ordinary mornings and familiar evenings. Then, without warning, it places one unforgettable scene in front of everyone. People later call it luck. Others call it perfect timing. But perhaps it is neither. Perhaps it is simply the moment when courage finally catches up with truth. Before you imagine the rest of this story, consider another possibility. What if the loudest declaration wasn't only meant for the crowd? What if it carried a message beyond words? A reminder that authenticity always finds its voice sooner or later. Some people spend years waiting for certainty while certainty quietly waits for courage. The difference between those two things is smaller than most realize. Something even more astonishing was unfolding beneath the surface while everyone focused on the obvious. There were details almost nobody noticed. Tiny moments. Silent reactions. Unexpected connections. They looked insignificant at first. But together they formed the beginning of something extraordinary. And when those hidden pieces finally came together, the entire meaning of that unforgettable confession changed. So don't rush away now. The next chapter doesn't simply continue the story, it completely transforms the reason behind that unforgettable moment. What seemed like a public declaration is only the first layer of a much greater revelation. And when you discover why it truly happened, everything you've assumed until now may suddenly look very different. A quiet question before we go further: what if the loudest moment wasn't the confession itself, but the silence that followed? Stay with me, because this is where the story takes a turn almost no one saw coming. The crowd expected excitement. They expected surprise. But what unfolded next carried a completely different kind of power. It wasn't noise that changed everything. It was the stillness that settled over every heart. In that brief pause, something invisible connected every person present to a moment they would remember for years. Your soulmate stood there, no longer hiding behind uncertainty. For the first time, there was nothing left to protect, nothing left to pretend. The weight they had carried for so long simply disappeared. Imagine what that feels like. Holding back your truest feelings for what seems like forever, only to realize that honesty feels lighter than fear ever did. Their eyes reflected peace instead of hesitation. Their voice no longer searched for permission. It simply carried the truth. Yet the most fascinating part was happening beyond what anyone could hear. Every decision your soulmate had delayed suddenly made perfect sense. Every sleepless night, every second thought, every moment of wondering whether the right time would ever arrive, all of it pointed toward this single unforgettable scene. Sometimes life doesn't reward speed. Sometimes it rewards patience. And perhaps this story is proof that the greatest moments are prepared quietly before they are revealed openly. Have you ever wondered why certain people cross your mind again and again? Why some connections refuse to fade, no matter how much time passes? Perhaps those feelings are not interruptions. Perhaps they are reminders that unfinished stories continue writing themselves even when no one is watching. Your soulmate finally understood this truth. They realized that running from genuine emotion only makes it return with greater clarity. And once that realization settled into their heart, there was no turning back. But listen carefully, because another unexpected detail appeared. Among the people watching, someone noticed something almost invisible. It wasn't the words. It wasn't the expression. It was the confidence that arrived after the confession. It looked as though your soulmate had stepped into a completely different version of themselves. Fear had quietly left the room, replaced by a calm certainty that inspired everyone around them. Courage has a remarkable way of spreading without making a sound. Now think about your own journey. How many moments have felt delayed? How many answers seem just out of reach? What if those pauses were never empty? What if they were quietly shaping the version of you that would recognize the right opportunity when it finally appeared? Life often prepares both sides of a meaningful connection before allowing the paths to fully align. And here's something worth holding on to until the very end. The people who witnessed this unforgettable moment didn't leave with the same thoughts they had when they arrived. Many walked away believing that genuine feelings should never remain hidden forever. One honest decision had quietly encouraged countless silent hearts to become a little braver. That is how authentic moments travel. They inspire lives you never even intended to touch. If this story has made you pause for even a moment, perhaps share what part spoke to you most in the comments. And if journeys like this remind you to believe in hope, staying connected by subscribing simply means we'll continue exploring these remarkable stories together. But don't think you've reached the biggest revelation. Not even close. Because after the crowd slowly disappeared and the excitement settled into memory, something completely unexpected was waiting just beyond that moment. A conversation. A discovery. A truth that had remained hidden for far longer than anyone imagined. And when that final piece emerged, the meaning behind your soulmate's public declaration became far greater than anyone could have predicted. One final thought before everything becomes clear: what if that unforgettable confession was never the destination? What if it was only the door that opened the chapter both of you were always meant to discover? Don't leave now, because the meaning behind everything you've heard is about to reveal itself in a way that changes the entire story. As the crowd slowly drifted away and ordinary life seemed to return, your soulmate remained unusually calm. The excitement had faded, yet something even stronger had taken its place: clarity. For the first time in a very long while, they no longer questioned what their heart had been trying to say. Every doubt that once felt enormous now seemed surprisingly small. It was as though speaking the truth had removed a weight they had carried for years without realizing it. But then something remarkable happened. Instead of searching for approval from everyone around them, your soulmate quietly turned inward. They began remembering every moment that had shaped this journey. The conversations that ended too soon. The opportunities that almost appeared. The unexpected coincidences that always seemed to bring your paths back into the same direction. Looking back, none of it felt random anymore. Every chapter, even the difficult ones, suddenly looked like preparation rather than delay. Have you ever noticed how life sometimes makes perfect sense only when you look backward? The pieces that once seemed scattered begin fitting together with astonishing precision. What looked like distance becomes growth. What felt like waiting becomes preparation. What seemed like silence becomes the quiet space where courage was slowly being built. That realization changed everything. Your soulmate no longer measured the future by fear or uncertainty. Instead, they chose to believe that genuine connections are strengthened by honesty, patience, and the willingness to remain authentic even when the outcome cannot be predicted. And that decision created a ripple far beyond a single moment. It transformed the way they looked at every new sunrise, every unexpected opportunity, and every possibility still waiting ahead. Now let me ask you something. What if this story isn't asking you to predict the future at all? What if it is inviting you to remember something you've always known deep inside, that truth has a way of finding its voice, that courage eventually replaces hesitation, and that meaningful moments often arrive when they are least expected? Sometimes the greatest transformation begins with one sincere step instead of 100 perfect plans. Perhaps that is why this message found you today. Not to convince you that every story unfolds the same way, but to remind you that hope becomes stronger when it is matched with wisdom, patience, and confidence. Extraordinary chapters are rarely written in a single day. They are built through countless unseen moments that quietly prepare the heart for what comes next. So carry this thought with you after this video ends. Never underestimate the quiet work that life is doing behind the scenes. Even when nothing appears to be changing, invisible progress may already be moving everything into place. The future often begins long before we recognize its first visible sign. If this journey brought a new perspective to your heart, consider sharing it with someone who may need a little encouragement today. And if these stories of hope, purpose, and meaningful possibilities speak to you, subscribing is simply a way for us to continue exploring them together in future videos. Until our next story, remember this. The loudest declaration is not always the one spoken before a crowd. Sometimes the loudest declaration is the quiet decision to live with honesty, courage, and hope from that moment forward. And perhaps, that is the beginning of the most extraordinary chapter of all. The story doesn't truly end here, because every unforgettable moment leaves behind one final question. What became of the two hearts after that extraordinary day? Stay with me for these last moments, because sometimes the greatest revelation arrives only after the applause has faded. Days passed, yet something had permanently changed. The world around them looked the same, but neither of them saw it through the same eyes anymore. Your soulmate carried a quiet confidence that had never existed before. They no longer searched for the perfect words because they had already spoken the truth that mattered most. Instead of wondering, they began living with purpose. Instead of fearing tomorrow, they welcomed it with hope. And perhaps that is the hidden message this entire journey has been leading toward. Life is not transformed by dramatic moments alone. It is transformed by what we choose after those moments. A single act of courage can open 1,000 unseen possibilities. One honest decision can become the beginning of a completely new chapter. The confession in front of everyone was unforgettable, but the life that followed became even more meaningful. Imagine looking back months from now and realizing that what once felt impossible slowly became natural. Conversations became easier. Smiles became genuine. The uncertainty that once filled every thought quietly disappeared, replaced by trust in the journey ahead. The future was no longer something to fear, it became something worth anticipating. Now pause for one last reflection. How many opportunities quietly wait for people who refuse to give up on authenticity? How many beautiful beginnings remain hidden behind one courageous choice? Perhaps more than we can ever count. The greatest stories are rarely written in a single breathtaking moment. They are written through daily choices, hope instead of doubt, patience instead of panic, honesty instead of hesitation. If this message stayed with you until the very end, thank you for sharing this journey with us. If these stories inspire you to look at life with fresh hope, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, share this video with someone who might need a little encouragement today, and subscribe so we can continue discovering meaningful stories together. Before we part, carry this one thought into every new day. The most powerful voice is not the one that speaks the loudest. It is the one that finally speaks with sincerity. And whenever truth is spoken with courage, something remarkable begins to move. Doors that once seemed closed start to open. Hearts become lighter. New possibilities quietly appear where none seemed to exist before. So walk forward with confidence. Trust the lessons you've gathered. Appreciate the moments that shaped you. And never forget that some of life's most extraordinary chapters begin with one honest decision made at exactly the right time. Until we meet again, remember this. Your greatest story has never been about the crowd that watched. It has always been about the courage that changed your future. One last mystery remains, and it is the one almost everyone overlooks. What happened inside your soulmate after the world heard those unforgettable words? The answer is more powerful than the confession itself. Stay with me, because this final chapter isn't about a single moment. It is about everything that moment awakened. Long after the crowd disappeared, your soulmate found themselves replaying that day again and again. Not because they regretted speaking from the heart, but because they finally understood something that had taken years to realize. Real strength isn't found in hiding emotions. It is found in living honestly, even when the future cannot be predicted. From that day forward, ordinary mornings felt different. Every sunrise reminded them that life always offers another opportunity to choose courage over hesitation. Every quiet evening became a reminder that patience often protects the most meaningful journeys. They stopped asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" and started asking, "What wonderful possibilities become available when I stop living in fear?" That single change transformed everything. Perhaps this is the message hidden inside today's story. Sometimes we wait for life to send us a perfect sign, while life quietly waits for us to become the kind of person who can recognize it. Growth rarely arrives with loud announcements. It appears through small decisions made consistently, until one day you look back and realize you have become someone stronger than you ever imagined. Now think carefully. How many beautiful opportunities have already been preparing themselves beyond your current view? How many unexpected blessings are simply waiting for the right moment to appear? No one can predict every chapter ahead, but one thing remains true: every meaningful journey is shaped by hope, resilience, and the willingness to keep moving forward. Your soulmate discovered that the greatest victory was never convincing the crowd. The greatest victory was finally becoming honest with themselves. That quiet transformation became the foundation for every chapter that followed. Confidence replaced uncertainty. Gratitude replaced anxiety. Possibility replaced limitation. And from that point on, the future no longer felt like a mystery to fear, it became an adventure worth embracing. So as this story comes to its final close, remember one simple truth. The loudest words may capture attention, but the quiet choices you make afterward determine the direction of your life. Carry that thought with you today. Walk with confidence. Choose authenticity. Trust the process that is unfolding one step at a time. Because the next extraordinary chapter may not begin with a dramatic announcement. It may begin with one calm decision, one hopeful heart, and one courageous step that changes everything. Until next time, keep believing that the most meaningful stories are still being written, and perhaps the most beautiful page of your journey has yet to be turned.